Hello, and welcome once again to CIS 121 at Portland Community College. I am Al Zimmerman. In the first week of the networking module, we looked at some of the terminology and some of the technology of networking. Then we took a look at your home network. If you recall, it's a pretty simple local area network. It has a modem to connect to an internet service provider. It has a router and a firewall and maybe a switch. And then a bunch of devices that connect to the network. In this module, in the second week of the networking module, we're going to look at the needs of a small business. We'll take a look at why a network provides value to a business, and then we'll look at how to create a network for a small business. Let's get started. The benefits of a business network are pretty simple. Basically, a network allows you to share resources among all of your employees. And by doing this, you reduce the cost for everyone. It allows you to provide services from a central location that it would be difficult to deploy on a person-by-person basis. Networks help you increase communication both among your employees and between your business and your customer, between your business and other businesses. And finally, networks allow you to increase security. Now, that seems a little strange because by connecting your network to the internet, you open it up to all sorts of malware attacks, as we talked about last week. But it allows you to also manage the security of your network from a central location. These are the sort of resources that you provide to your business through a network. Let's take a special look at the first thing on the list, directory services. This breaks down into three areas. The first is identification. Now, if you've ever had to supply a user ID to log in somewhere, then you have identified yourself. And this is true whether you're a person or a piece of software. You identify yourself to the network and say, "This is me, let me in." Authentication is the way the network guarantees that you are telling the truth about your identity. The simplest way to do this is with a password. You provide a second word that presumably only you know and is difficult to guess. It can get more complicated than this. Two-factor authentication requires that you not only provide the first factor, your password, but also a phone or a little fob where the network sends you a number, and then you enter that into the system as well. It can get even more strict using biometrics, for example, where they require you to provide a fingerprint or a retinal scan. In any case, authentication guarantees that you are who you say you are. And once the network knows that you are who you say you are, then it can allow you access to the various resources. This is called authorization. Every resource on a network has an access control list. Who's allowed to access that resource, and by default, who isn't. All of these services, all of these three aspects of directory services are provided by the network. In a Windows network, this is provided by in a In a Windows network, this is provided by software called Active Directory. In Mac or Unix networks, other software is used. But this is a service provided by the network. There are other resources that a network typically provides. Most important is the file and data storage. This is a way of giving each person on the network more disk space by putting that disk space on a server and then letting each member of the network mount that disk on their own device. You can also share storage among network users. This can also be a more sophisticated service, backup and restore services, where one machine goes out and backs up the other machines on the network, saving each individual workstation that amount of effort. Database servers are another way to provide data storage for everyone on the network. Another aspect of network resources are shared applications and license pools. If you're going to have everyone on the network using, for example, Microsoft Office, you can provide the same version of Microsoft Office to everyone on the network by providing that from a central location. Sometimes, if your network is fast enough, you can actually put the software on the central server. Sometimes you just use the central server to keep all of the workstations up to date. This is called configuration management, making sure every workstation's configuration is the same. Sometimes you have an application that not everyone uses all the time, that only some people are using at any particular time. This way, for example, say you have 100 people on your network, 100 workstations. And every once in a while, everybody uses this application, but at any one time, maybe only 20 people are using it. Sometimes, especially with expensive software, you can buy just 20 licenses, or 20 seats, they call it. And then you put these licenses in a central location, in a central license pool. And when someone fires up that application, they check out a license from the server. This is another way that you can save costs on software that's very expensive. And just like you can share software, you can share hardware as well. The most common hardware that people share in a small business are printers. Instead of buying everyone a printer, you can get a better printer, faster, more colors, easier to maintain, and then put it on the network and allow everyone to get at it through a printer queue. That way you can have a more expensive resource, a more capable resource, but spread that cost and spread that utility among all the members of the network. Another way that you can get advantages of a network is through email management. Now, by this, I not only mean routing email to everybody's workstation, but more importantly, businesses have additional responsibilities around record keeping. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act requires businesses to keep records, in some cases for several years. It also requires businesses to delete records. This is easier done in a centralized fashion. That way, every employee doesn't have to remember all the regulations. So managing email, making sure it gets to people, removing the spam, keeping the records up to date, and deleting email when it's necessary is all part of a network resource function. Communication services are very important. These are things like voice over IP telephone service, desktop sharing so that people can collaborate, video conferencing so people can see each other from long distances, or web conferencing so that you can connect with other people, sometimes your customers. Finally, another area that we'd like to talk about that's a benefit of a network in a small business is maximizing and optimizing your wide area network access. Everybody in the network doesn't need their own modem and their own router, their own ISP connection. You can get that connection through the network. Let's take a closer look at that. Businesses have additional requirements than you might have in your home. One is, for example, if the network connection to your home goes down, unless you've got an assignment due for your classes, it's not a big deal. You can call up the internet service provider, and if they take an hour to repair it or whatever it takes, you can put up with that. Businesses cannot stand to be off the net. So you need continuous access to the internet even when your ISP, your internet service provider, is having trouble. Well, how do you do that? You use more than one ISP. You have several modems, several routers, and if one goes down, you can still use the other ones. Another more interesting aspect of sharing wide area network access is some kinds of network traffic is more important than other kinds of network traffic. For example, if you're doing web conferencing, video conferencing with customers, people notice when there's a slight hesitation or a glitch in that kind of network traffic. And it's much more annoying than if a piece of email arrives a few seconds late. So businesses will make sure that that kind of information is always given the best access to the net. And they do this by using special, more sophisticated switches or more sophisticated routers that actually looks at the packets, determines the type of traffic, and routes that stuff at a higher priority than, say, your email traffic or your FTP traffic or that sort of thing. Now, to get the multiple ISP connections, you use a load balancer appliance. Sometimes this is a dedicated device. Sometimes it's just a more intelligent switch. Sometimes you can do this very cheaply with a fairly stupid little switch. But if you want to do the other stuff, the traffic optimization, you need a more sophisticated appliance. These days, none of this stuff is very expensive. The key thing is that for each ISP, you have a modem and a router to connect it to your local area network. The other ISP has the same setup, and then you have the load balancer appliance to connect it up. A lot of times that load balancer appliance will automatically enable traffic to go to one ISP when it was previously going to the other. Another aspect of business networking that we have to pay attention to here is multiple levels of security. Let's face it, some users in your network can be trusted more than others. Sometimes you're allowing members of the public or your customers access to your network. Maybe you can have physical security so you can lock the systems away when you don't want access. Sometimes you're just providing public access to your network. Say if you're a Starbucks and you're providing free Wi-Fi. You don't want those people in your business network. You want to give them the services that they want without endangering the rest of your security. In another situation, you may find that certain services you provide to your customers need to have unfettered access to the network. Unfettered access to the internet. For example, if you have a web server in your network that is serving directly to the public, it needs to be isolated from the other parts of your network that contain proprietary or private information. So the way we implement this is with trust zones. Now the left-hand side of this diagram looks a lot like your home network. You have a modem and you have a router and a firewall that connects to a switch, which then connects all of the other pieces to your network using the same star network topology that you've seen before. Now you could have additional additional modems and routers as we saw earlier. But the important thing is that you have one firewall that is managing access to this network. To create a new zone, to create another zone of a different security, you simply add another router and firewall, and it connects other network devices, other network nodes. And by adjusting the security here in this router and firewall, you can restrict access to these devices in Zone 2. Usually you want to make sure these devices in Zone 2 have access out into here and, of course, out to the Internet. But you want to make sure that nobody else has access from Zone 1 to Zone 2. In our assignment, we're going to be using this kind of functionality to provide network services for a company that brings customers in and allows them to use their network, but wants to keep parts of the network private to just members of the organization. So here's a Visio diagram of these two ideas together. What we've got is this load balancer arrangement at the front end. We've got two modems talking to two different ISPs. We've got routers to connect their networks to ours, and then this load balancer appliance to feed that traffic into our firewall and then to our main switch. In this particular business, they've got a bunch of customer workstations, and they're on their own switch so that we can expand later. They've got a wireless access point. They've got printers, a large format plotter. They've got a high-speed printer that customers can use. They've got an application and customer data server that is providing directory services and storage for the customers. They've got a DHCP server so that if people bring in their own laptops or their own tablets and connect up through the wireless access point, we can make sure those people play nice on our network as well. So this is all in the customer zone. Then we've got another firewall and another router that creates a private zone for their office in the back room. This has got its own switch, its own wireless access point. It's got business data services. It's got places for business PCs, maybe a multifunction printer, a scanner, a fax, what you might find in a small business office. And then you've got the protected data for the company. Now these people can use the same DHCP server as the other part of the network, but you can guarantee that none of the customers who are coming in to use this part of the business can get to any of the protected information in the private zone. You will create a network something like this. Yours will probably look a little different, but pretty close. So you might want to take some time to pause this and take a careful look at this network diagram. Okay then. So to summarize, your assignment is to design a small business network. Read the assignment carefully. You'll find information in the assignment that indicates what you need to do, how you need to design the network. You'll find a proposal template that you should copy to your own machine and add information to. You need to look at the analysis and the design sections of the proposal document. Add your information to the analysis section. Add your information to the design section. Don't bother with the other sections. This proposal document is organized according to the system development lifecycle. Then, using your analysis and your design, create a network diagram. You can use Visio or you can use Glyphy. Make sure it uses the design elements you pointed out in the proposal, the design elements that satisfy the customer's requirements. You don't have to use a floor plan in this one. Oftentimes you just do an initial design and show the customer what you think they need. You'll find that, for example, in our diagram earlier, you saw a router and a firewall and a switch. A lot of times you'll actually find those in one product. So your later, more detailed design, your implementation plan, will look a little bit different from this initial network design. For this diagram, show me the functions. Show me the routers, show me the firewalls, show me the switches. And of course, show me the printers and wireless access point or whatever else your customer needs. Finally, update your journal the way that you do every week. Give me some feedback on the course. Give me some feedback on the assignment. There's a quiz, number 6. Find that in the quiz section on the Desire to Learn content. And then upload your files to the student server. Make sure the journal validates. Make sure that the proposal and the diagram are in your Assignment 6 folder. And then finally, drop the proposal document and the design diagram in the Dropbox. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing your work.